full year before Leon Canizero was elected to the office of District Attorney, an event took place that, while some applaud, others question.
New Orleans is an incredibly lively, wonderful, creative city.
The Crescent City is known for many things. Good government has never been one of them. For decades, competing factions in the city's government resulted in conditions that would have been unthinkable elsewhere in the country.
It's big government in the worst kinds of ways.
But for years, New Orleans remained unchanged. Its problems seemed intractable. In the spring of 2007, Vera issued a study laying out the plans for change. Then, far from the distractions and daily political pressures of New Orleans, Vera brought together the leaders of the city's longtime factions in a retreat.
From the very outset, the whole notion of having a retreat where the heads of agencies would come together and sit together and talk and argue and come to some consensus was a foundation for this idea that we're not going to do this on the nightly news.
Some question the methods in which the Vera Institute of Justice obtained its no-bid contract after the federal grant it received originally ran out. Some questioned the decision that was made for the City Council and Vera to meet in a way that the public had no knowledge, away from the press and out of the public eye. Others would question the effectiveness, if not dangers, related to the rating system itself that Vera supervises. But the big question seems to be the funding of the Vera Institute of Justice. The Vera Institute of Justice came to New Orleans on a federal grant, but now relies on full funding from the taxpayers or grants that it may receive for special projects.
If we're able to continue to financially support our presence here, we'll be able to do more and more to help the leaders of the city improve the system.
We have a grant that we recently received from the Baptist Community Ministries, and that grant is to provide supervision. The first thing we'll do with the grant is begin to develop that program. It is moving up into that probably higher low-risk category or lower moderate risk category.
Criminal Justice Commissioner James Carter says he'll propose $623,000 in city dollars to expand pretrial services in 2013.
One of the problems with the Vera Institute of Justice's use of grant money to fund a program they call supervision is the misunderstanding of the word supervision as it relates to a pretrial setting. Supervision in a pretrial setting is simple. It's the guaranteeing of the return of a defendant to court if he fails to or refuses to go to court.
Hi, my name is Graham Martin. I'm the first Assistant District Attorney for the Parish of Orleans, and my charge is to manage the District Attorney's Office on a day-to-day basis and make sure that we develop, design, and implement systems that are more fair and more expedient in the dispatch of our work. This is not rocket science. This is really simple stuff. You take the fundamental constitutional principle and you apply it, and you look at it and you say, what are the concerns of pretrial release? They are simply two: that a person will appear when they're requested, and that they do not present a threat to the community to engage in further criminal activity during the pendency of the proceedings.
We now know there's many different types of pretrial release, of which the Vera Institute of Justice is just one. While we may question the use of temporary money to fund supervision, the Vera Institute of Justice puts most of the weight of what they do on their risk assessments and their ability to determine the level of risk an individual poses.
And so then looking at what the purpose of pretrial services is, it's often perceived to be getting people out of jail. That's why it starts in some jurisdictions, because they have overcrowded jails. And so pretrial services programs tend to be perceived as getting their get out of jail free card. Just a few things on the risk assessment instrument. It's essentially a statistical instrument. You look at what factors have been shown to be predictive of public safety risk or failure to appear. So for example, in weighing the current charge and to what extent that's relevant. And so in that regard, the purpose is really to enhance public safety and to ensure a return to court. It's looking not only at the people who are low risk and can be safely released without great risk to public safety or failures to appear, but also to assess people who might be high risk and to determine whether there are some people that really need more restrictive conditions or perhaps even preventive detention.
So after getting all of that information from both the defendant and the various databases, we put that together in a report as well as a risk assessment instrument, which assigns a weight to various factors in the criminal history and in the residential stability of the individual, and comes out with a score that then puts them in either a low, medium, or high risk category. For the current charge, we also rate more highly if the current charge is a violent offense, and in addition, if the current charge involves a firearm.
So as you can see, the job that the Vera Institute of Justice is supposed to be performing for the city of New Orleans is to conduct a risk assessment on defendants as they're being brought into the jail system. The Vera Institute of Justice provides information relative to their success to the City Council and other various institutions. But the information they provide as proof of their success doesn't match up with the job they're supposed to be doing. The instruments they use to suggest their success are numbers of dollars saved due to fewer people being in jail. But the true measure of their success would actually be the risk assessments themselves, which they won't release to the public. And in fact, last year, in House Bill 367, attempted to block them from ever being released to the public.
And then, of course, there's the savings to the community. The pretrial programs typically result in a decrease in pretrial detention, even if it's not their stated goal. That's often the impact. Since pretrial services began operating here in New Orleans, there has been a drop in the pretrial population. It's not entirely clear how much that can be attributed to pretrial services.
They say they can't tell how much of the drop is attributable to them, and then turn around and attribute it to themselves as a savings.
But it's a drop of about 16%, I believe, about 180 some individuals. If that were to be all attributed to pretrial release, the annualized savings of that kind of drop in the population would be about 1.4 million.
The ultimate goal is that we are going to save a lot of money in terms of jailing people.
A couple of basics about, well, and I should say, as I mentioned, the purpose is public safety and the return to court. So, for example, we do a risk assessment. That risk assessment is to determine who poses a risk of public safety or failure to return to court. If what you're trying to measure is something completely different, you would develop a different risk assessment instrument that looks at different factors. So some of the pretrial basics are universal screening, verification of information, use of an objective, research-based instrument to assess risk, following up on those who are not released, supervision of defendants as an alternative to pretrial detention, and collection of and analysis of data.
So with the 2014 budget cycle coming up, the Vera Institute of Justice's inability to determine exactly what level of jail population reduction can be attributed to them, and their lack of ability or desire to release the risk assessments, which is what they're hired to perform, makes it hard to determine exactly what value Vera has. The city has said, however, that they would not let public safety become a problem.
Susan Guidry chairs the City Council Criminal Justice Committee. In August, she called the working group to council chambers to share the progress of pretrial services. Vera explained its staff of 2 inside the jail on weekdays interviewed 60% of people booked for felonies before their first appearance in court, and that 30% of people released went home with no or low bond.
So it's too early to call that a clear rearrest rate, but it's an extremely heartening figure and should go a long way to lessening people's concerns that this program will in any way cut into our joint efforts to enhance public safety.
By no means is our support of pretrial services intended to have individuals who are violent offenders benefit from an assessment that is adverse to that.
And Vera is here to help us to make good decisions, to make smart decisions, and to make decisions that are here to protect the public, and also to ensure that people return to court, and that hopefully, if there's an opportunity, to make sure that they do not repeat as offenders. But they are ultimately just that, one of our tools.
The nonprofit, taxpayer-funded Vera Institute of Justice wants people to believe that the measure of success for them is how many people are not in jail. That's not how the criminal justice system works. The Vera Institute of Justice was brought in the city by the city council to perform a task. And that task is to apply a risk assessment, to be a third party, to get in between the criminal court system, speak to the defendants, determine what that defendant's story is, and apply a risk factor based on the questions they ask. At the end of those 12 questions, they come out with a number. That number is between 0 and 24. 24 is high risk. The problem is, if you have two guys standing next to each other, both having been arrested for simple burglary. It's the only arrest they've ever had in their lives. But guy number one, this is his first time ever being arrested, never been in jail. He should probably be low risk. Guy number two, it's the first problem he's had, that arrest, but he's missed court 11 times. He should be a higher risk. In a scale of 0 to 24, with 12 questions, a guy who misses court, which is what pretrial release is all about, not missing court, but a guy who misses court 11 times, 12 times, 20 times, gets 1 point. He's 1 point worse than the guy who's never been arrested before. The Vera Institute of Justice can only be judged based on the risk assessments they apply, based on the questionnaire provided. The risk assessments performed by the Vera Institute of Justice can be done by the court system. In fact, they are done by the court system, by every level. The only thing the Vera Institute of Justice brings to the criminal court justice system is a price tag. Anything they do can be done by the courts, has been done by the courts, and will always be done by the courts, whether the Vera Institute of Justice is there or not. The Vera Institute of Justice cannot argue with the truth. And the truth is their job is to apply risk assessments to defendants as they come through the criminal court justice system. If their job is to apply criminal court justice system risk assessments, then their proof is the assessments, not the number of people not in jail. Tell the city council the Vera Institute of Justice needs to release their assessments before getting any more of the taxpayers' money. Then there's the cost of supervision. When the Vera Institute of Justice provides a referral to a judge and the judge follows it and the defendant is released for free, or if the jail's too small and there's no room and the defendant is released for free, who goes after them when they don't come back for court? The New Orleans Police, the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Department, the District Attorney's Investigative Division. Who spends the money to enforce the rules when Vera's in charge of supervision? The truth is, the Vera Institute of Justice refuses to release their risk assessments to the public. They claim privacy concerns, but there's nothing in the risk assessment that's not in a public record. The Times-Picayune proved that when the Vera Institute failed to confirm whether or not Akeen Scott had ever been arrested before in another place. The Times-Picayune did a simple Google search and found out that he had been arrested on a marijuana charge, and the Vera Institute of Justice reported he had never been arrested on another charge. The truth is, the Vera Institute of Justice won't release their risk assessments because it exposes the truth about Vera. And the truth about the Vera Institute of Justice is they're a program that has existed in the American court systems since the beginning of the American court systems. Pre-trial is a release from jail before trial. And there's multiple ways to be released from jail before trial, and they include free, unsupervised release. But it's the judges who make these decisions, not a third party, taxpayer-funded nonprofit. The Vera Institute of Justice cannot justify their position in the city if they have to use their risk assessments as a measure of their success. The one thing that they're paid to do, the one thing that the judges are supposed to get from them, the risk assessments, could possibly be the problem that the judges are having in the first place. If you're going to be in the court system and you're going to be making decisions about the release of a defendant, then those decisions are a public record issue. And the Vera Institute of Justice is required to release the risk assessments they've taken. Contact your city council person. Demand the release of the risk assessments. If Vera wants to get paid to do a job the courts do already, the least they can do is show us what we're paying them for.
For a number of years, I was a private lawyer in this town, and I represented the commercial bail industry. And I wrote the Bail Reform Act of 1993, which was sponsored by then Senator Mark Morial in the state legislature. So I have a firm understanding of all of pretrial release. This process is important to our criminal justice system, that we look at people, we evaluate people, we determine by scientific basis whether or not they are a risk or not. If they are a risk, then we want them to post bail. We want them to get a commercial surety. We want someone to come in and say, I'll stand for this guy, and if he doesn't appear, I'll endure the penalty of his failure, i.e. I'll pay the state. So this is an important process to bring fairness to our criminal justice systems. When the program is formally established, it will have to be handed off to a governmental agency. It's not going to be permanently contracted with the Vera Institute. They are basically a consulting group who comes down and helps people figure out how to solve problems. The nonprofit people from New York City are here to set up the program. They're aiding and assisting the city in establishing the program.
Some say Hurricane Katrina was the worst thing that ever happened to the city of New Orleans. Others would say that the changes brought by Hurricane Katrina were the best thing that ever happened. One thing's for certain, a complete revamping of the criminal court system led by District Attorney Leon Cannizzaro has brought many changes that both protect the public and serve the criminal court justice system in a way that makes it more efficient, cost-effective, and certainly protects the people. 5 years after winning the office of the District Attorney, Leon Cannizzaro's ability to bring a system together and make it work in the right direction for justice and public safety is quite apparent.